In this video, I'm going to be going through physical lighting and I'm going to be creating a pretty basic product photography studio setup. And the way I go about starting this process is by having a look at reference images. So I'll type in product photography studio setup or something similar, and I'll just have a look at the behind the scenes, see what kind of lights they're using, the positions, and try and get the gist of what they do in real life so that I can kind of try and recreate it within Keyshot. So the reason I use physical lights instead of say HDRI is because if I add a couple of pins in here, even though it's really quick to get some good results, I can just up that brightness, turn it to say a rectangle, add another pin, use the crosshairs highlight tool, and already get something half decent. You'll see that I've got the geometry view open as well, which you can open with O on the keyboard, and there's no visual representation of the light. If I zoom out on the real-time view, then the way the HDRI works means that the pins are sort of part of the environment. So it means that if I get any reference images of behind the scenes setups, it's kind of hard to tell and hard to recreate what's going on in those with the HDRI. So I'm going to delete these pins, and you'll notice that the startup HDR is still there, but I've reduced the brightness right down to 0.01. This could be just changed to pitch black. I could delete the startup HDR altogether. But the way I'm thinking about it is if I'm in a real life photography studio, they're going to be blocking out windows, blocking off doors, trying to get as little light in the room as possible, but they're not going to manage to get it completely pitch black. So that's why I'm leaving a little bit of brightness there. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do, press Control 5 on the keyboard, and that's going to add a plane in to the scene. So you can see in the geometry view outlined by that orange line. Alternatively, you can go to Edit, Add Geometry, and Add Plane. And with it selected, I'll just deselect it there. With the plane selected, you can hit Move tool in the geometry view, and I'm going to use the green arrow to put it above the product that we're shooting, which is the Keyshot camera just from the cloud library. And what I'm looking for is roughly the distance I want that light to be from the camera, and that looks roughly right. We can change it later if we need to. And now I want to take this light and put it down the side of the camera. So I could just do that manually, or I can change the pivot object with the crosshairs tool to be the camera. So you'll notice that the move tool has moved onto the camera. It's also taking into account the way it's facing, so it's kind of slightly off center here, which means that the move tool is also off center. So if I start to drag this down, you'll notice that the plane's at an angle. And while we could reverse the pivot object and put it back onto the plane and rotate it ourselves, it's easier to just change the axis to global. So that means that the move tool will straighten up, and now it's in line with the Z, Y, and X axis you can see in the bottom left. And if I pull it down to the side now, it's going to be straight. So I want it not quite level, I want it to point slightly down onto the camera. And I'm then going to use the green tool to rotate it roughly in position. And now what I'm going to do in the materials library is search for area light. I'm just going to grab any of them from there. Applied it to the plane in the geometry view. And now if I double click that plane, the options will appear on the right. So from here, I'm going to untick applied to back of geometry straight away. That's not going to make any difference to the real-time view, but all it's doing is that there's now no light emitting from this side of the plane. It's just coming from this side of the plane. And I'm going to up these lumens to, let's try 3000. Looks about right. Now I want to change the color, and you always want to keep it in Kelvin. So this will help you keep the lights looking real, as real lights are always within that Kelvin scale. So if you look it up online, you can find out that product photography will tend to use studio lights of say, I think it was around 5 to 6,500. So if I try 5,000, maybe a little too orange for me. Let's bump that up to 6,000 and click OK. And now it looks pretty good already, but we can use that green tool to just rotate it into position. I'm actually going to put it pretty much back to where it was. I just want that strip of light to kind of just edge into that change of material. And I'm pretty happy with that. The only thing is this strip going down, I kind of want that to go all the way down. So what I'm going to do is reverse that pivot object. So it's going to go back onto the plane, and I want the axis to go back to local as well. And I'm going to use the red tool to just scale that vertically. Now I'm going to keep it just from touching the edge and click OK. So this is going to be our key light, the main brightest light. So I'm going to rename that to key light, and I'm going to right click and duplicate. So you'll notice in the real-time view it's got a bit brighter. That's just because those two planes are stacked on top of each other. And I'm going to change this one to be the fill light. So it's going to be selected in the geometry view already. You can see the orange line again. So I'm just going to have to hit the move tool, and I want the pivot object to be back on that camera. There's no point changing the axis to global again, because all we're going to do is rotate that round. And what I'm looking for is a nice reflection of the lens of that camera. So you can see that crescent coming in from the right. It's about right to me. And because it's the fill light, a lot of the time they tend to be a little bit further away and a bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that yellow cube, and that's going to scale everything uniformly. And I'm going to drag that, click and drag that to the right. You can see that's getting further away and larger. This does mean that it's going to need a bit more power. You can see it's a little bit duller than the key light. So I'm going to up that to 4,500, maybe 5,000, and leave it at that. So that lighting setup looks okay already, and the product's well lit. The only thing is the background is still a bit boring. So what we're going to do is add in a spotlight. So Control 5 on the keyboard just to bring a plane up. Just need a bit of geometry, and I'm going to double click on the plane and change the type to spotlight. So you'll notice these lines appearing from this white cube. That's the spotlight. So I'm going to click Move tool, and I want this pointing upwards towards the back wall. And it's inside the plinth at the moment, so I'm going to just pull that out to the side and maybe push it forwards a little bit. So if I then go back to the scene tree over on the right, that will change the color of these lines. And I'm going to extend this blue one all the way up to the backdrop. And the orange one is the beam angle, and the purple one is the fall off. So if I double click on the plane, you see the beam angle and the fall off. If I decrease the beam angle, it's going to decrease the whole circle. If I decrease the fall off, that inner circle is going to move as well. So I prefer just to do it in the scene tree, and I'm going to make that a bit larger. I'm going to drop that fall off right down so it's a nicer gradient. I'm also going to reduce the power to, let's say, 30 or 35. And I'm going to move that to be behind the camera. So in the geometry view, moving that blue line to be central to that camera. I'm going to drop it slightly as well. I can click OK, get that out of the way. And that's looking okay to me. I might change the color, see what the Kelvin scale is. Want that maybe a bit more orangey. So I'll drop that by 1000. Might up the power just to 40. And as you can see, there's these yellow lines that are in the real-time view. And if I click off, they disappear, but that's because I've changed the settings. So you can go up to view and show light sources, and that'll have them on all the time. We'll press L on the keyboard and it toggles it on and off. So I'd already had it off before, but if yours is showing those yellow lines, just hit L on the keyboard and it'll get rid of them. So the only thing left to do is check the lighting preset. It's on product, I'm happy with that. And I want to make a few changes to the image style. So I'm going to change it to photographic, go between low contrast, high contrast. I prefer low contrast. Let's bump up the exposure a little bit. Let's bump up that contrast slightly from there as well. Let's add a bit of denoise. So 0.3, yeah, that's okay. Don't want it too high, otherwise it will take away some of the detail. And I'm happy with that. So that was my basic product studio. I hope you found it helpful. And if you've got any questions, please just leave them as a comment below.